Well, I think there are at least two key ways in which this could work. The first one is to focus on urgent operational requirements, to basically focus on those things that we see we lack in operations. And I think the other way of thinking about this would be to start with what countries are willing to do, because there are a lot of sovereignty concerns related to specialization, prioritization, because once you collaborate more, you accept mutual dependencies, you make yourself dependent on each other, and that is a difficult trade-off to find for NATO member states. I think the ambition behind smart defense is rather large, actually. If smart defense succeeds, it will change the way that NATO member states develop, provide, operate, maintain, but also discard military capabilities. That is very encompassing in itself, and it would create a new way of doing defense policy within the NATO context. Well, I think on funding, the interesting question is what can NATO do to give incentives to member states to engage in this? And I think we can already see that NATO is starting discussions on seed funding for projects, on common funding, on more common funding to help member states make the case that this is actually something that is in their interest to do, not just a priority that comes out of headquarters, but something that in their capitals they can explain as being beneficial and useful. I think for partners, the key question is what is their role in NATO operations? I think that is what is driving partnership for a lot of countries who do not necessarily aspire to NATO membership. So the question for both NATO and partners becomes, how do you structure that relationship? What kind of capability goals can be defined where partners can plug in a capability that does not already exist in abundance within NATO in itself, but that fills a visible and important gap in NATO's inventory. Well, I think it needs to be a mix. Clearly, smart defense cannot succeed without the buy-in from member states and from capitals. This is for them to decide. At the same time, NATO as an organization needs to think about how it can most efficiently structure its role as a facilitator, as an advisor, but perhaps, and I know this is slightly provocative, but perhaps also as an enforcer of these decisions. And one way to do this would be to try and design a defense planning process within NATO that is slightly more intrusive. And this can be mostly done by two ways, by making it on the one hand more forward-looking, more future-oriented, and by increasing the multinational goals that it covers, in order so that it becomes less of a bilateral NATO to one member state kind of arrangement and a more encompassing tool. Well, I think the chances are that today we have a very different context. We have a triangular challenge of austerity, of operational challenges, which we can see when our forces do deploy, and of the uncertainty in the strategic environment. So therefore the pressure to change the way we do business is much greater. However, one has to, of course, acknowledge that member state governments will, within that general context, still pursue different priorities, will have different preferences. There is no unifying threat out there, and that needs to be taken into account as NATO develops the smart defense agenda at Chicago, but also following up on Chicago to make sure that it is actually not a headline-grabbing moment that fizzles out after the summit.